Montana Territory, January 1891. 9 men are camped at the base of the Beartooth Range, halfway through a 3-month trap line. The fire is low. The barrel by the door holds 80 pounds of salt pork they packed in October. The brine smells right. The meat looks right, brown on the outside, firm to the touch. The winter outside is 40 below and dropping. By the time the snow broke in April, 4 of those men walked out. 5 did not. The winter got the blame. The cold always gets the blame. But there was not a single frostbite mark on any one of those 5 men. They had fire. They had shelter. They had 80 pounds of meat in a barrel 3 feet from where they slept. It was not the cold that killed them. It was not the altitude. It was not bad luck. It was the barrel. More precisely, it was what they did not know to do to what was in it. That gap in knowledge has a name. It is called whole cure preservation. The way your great-grandfather turned one hog in November into a family's protein through April, without a refrigerator, without a freezer, without a single trip to town. And I am going to walk you through every step of it, all 7, the way it was actually done. There is a 7th step, the one Earl wrote in his notebook and underlined twice, the one the packing houses needed you to forget. It is the step that separates the 4 men who walked out from the 5 who did not. We build to it. Stay with me. If the power went out in your county tomorrow and stayed out for a month, could you keep 100 pounds of meat from rotting? Most grown men in this country could not answer that question with a yes. Their grandfathers could answer it in their sleep. That is not a small gap, friend. That is the difference between a family that eats through a hard winter and a family that does not. The stores hold 3 days. 3 days of food between most American households and an empty shelf. Your great-grandmother's root cellar held 6 months. Her smokehouse held a year. The skill that closed that gap did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because somebody figured out there was more money in you not knowing it. We are going to close that gap today. All 7 steps, every one of them yours before we are done. Before we go on, there is something I want to put in your hands before winter comes. Earl's notebook runs to 312 pages. I have spent 3 years pulling the most useful parts into one place. Water, fire, meat, medicine, heat. The skills that kept a Montana family alive from January to January without a single bill from anybody. Everything is at hankmerritt.com. Link is below. All right, back to the barrel. I am Hank Merritt. I was raised on the eastern slope of the Beartooth Range by my grandfather Earl after my father died in a timber accident when I was 9 years old. Earl spent 40 years in these mountains, trapper, timberman, self-sufficient from the first frost to the last one. When he passed, he left me one thing, a worn leather notebook, 312 pages written in pencil by a man who never once needed a grocery store to feed his family through a Montana winter. He made me swear on his last afternoon that the old ways would not die with me. Every skill I am about to walk you through came from that notebook. This is me keeping my word, neighbor. Before we get into the meat of it, tap subscribe. Not for me, because the buried skills we pull back into daylight around here, you are going to want the next one. There are 300 more pages in that notebook. We are not done for a long time. There are 7 pieces to doing this right, 7 in order. Miss any one, you lose the meat. Miss the last one, and I mean this, you lose the man eating it. Most people who try this at home get the first 4 close enough. Piece 5 is where the recipe books start to wander. Piece 6 is the one the packing houses quietly pulled out of every home preservation guide printed after 1931. And Piece 7, the one Earl underlined twice, is the step that kept 4 men alive in the Beartooth and left 5 in the ground. We build to it piece by piece. Do not skip ahead. The order matters. Piece 1. The first thing your great-grandfather knew that most men now do not: when to kill. Picture Earl standing at the fence line in late November, breath fogging, ground crusted. The hog finished on corn and acorns, solid and heavy, shoulder firm as oak when he knocks it with his knuckle. He is not looking at a calendar. He is looking at the sky and feeling the air on his face. And that air, cold, dry, still, is his first tool. Butcher in cold and dry weather. That is the whole rule. Late November through January was the Montana window. Below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the air becomes your free refrigeration. The carcass has to chill through overnight, ideally a full day before the knife ever comes out. Here is the method Earl used every time without exception. Choose an animal between 200 and 300 pounds live weight. Back fat thick, skin firm. Slaughter clean and bleed thoroughly. Blood left in the meat sours the cure before the salt ever gets a chance. Scald at 140 to 150 degrees so the hair scrapes clean. Gut. Hang from the gambrel in the shed and let the carcass chill overnight until it stops steaming in the cold air and firms to the touch. Then, and only then, you cut. The United States Department of Agriculture's own farm bulletins from the early 1900s told households flat out, cure when the weather is cold and dry, or the meat will sour on you. That is not folklore. That is the federal government confirming what your great-grandmother did by instinct every November of her life. Here is what changed. In the 1930s, the frozen food industry rolled into American homes. By 1955, the average American household had a refrigerator, and the cold shed was firewood. Nobody banned the cold shed. They just sold you a plug-in version for $400 and made sure you forgot you ever needed the real one. This week, mark your calendar. First hard freeze after Thanksgiving. That is your window, not before. Piece 2, the cut. This is where 9 out of 10 beginners waste the best meat on the animal, and it is never the cut they expect. Picture Earl at a plank table in the cold shed, sleeves rolled, breath fogging, the carcass hanging and firm in front of him. He is not cutting like a butcher shop. He is cutting for storage. Those are 2 completely different knives making 2 completely different decisions. Here is the pattern. Take the hams off the hind quarters, whole, bone-in, trimmed square. These get the longest cure and the most salt. Take the bacon sides from the belly, rectangular slabs, 12 to 15 pounds each on a good hog, rind on. Take the shoulders, the Boston butt, and the picnic for either cure or grinding into sausage. Take the jowl for salt pork. Save the fat back clean, that is your lard and your future salt pork. Everything else, the belly ends, the side scraps, the trim, goes into the barrel. Hams whole, bacon square, shoulders your choice, everything else into the barrel. That is the cut pattern Earl used from the time he was 14 years old. Same pattern his father used, same pattern the USDA still recognizes in its home preservation documentation today. The beginner's mistake, every single time, is the loin. The pretty cut, the pork chops. Do not cure the loin. Loin is too lean. It cures unevenly, dries out, turns hard as leather by February. Save the loin for fresh eating the first week. Cure the fat cuts. Fat is what carries the salt in and holds the moisture through the long storage. Lean fights the salt. Fat works with it. They will sell you a $900 countertop curing chamber with a Bluetooth app. Fine. Or you can do what Earl did with a plank, a knife, and a barrel that cost him nothing. This week, if you are starting with a store-bought cut, buy pork belly, not loin, belly. That is the training cut. That is where the skill starts. First pattern break, 2 pieces in. Everything so far, the weather, the animal, the cut, your great-grandmother could have walked you through on a cold Saturday afternoon. What is coming next is where the skill stops being common sense and starts being chemistry. And chemistry is exactly where the 9 men in the Beartooth went wrong. Piece 3. Piece 3, the salt. This is where the skill actually starts pulling weight. And this is the piece with 1 number in it that has not moved in 200 years. Picture your great-grandmother standing over a wooden barrel in the root cellar, a scoop of coarse salt in one hand, a raw egg in the other. No measuring cup, no kitchen scale. Just those 2 things and 40 years of knowing what she was doing. Use coarse, non-iodized salt, stock salt, kosher salt, rock salt for brine. Never iodized table salt. It discolors the meat and adds a bitterness that works all the way through to the finished cure. That is not preference, that is chemistry. 2 methods used together. Dry salting first, meat rubbed on every surface, into every crease, against every bone. Miss a single spot, and that spot rots. The old-timers called it bone sour. It starts at the joint, works inward, and by the time you smell it, the whole ham is gone. Then brine curing. Meat packed into the barrel in layers, salt between each layer, brine poured over until every piece is fully submerged. The ratio your great-grandmother knew by feel, 1 pound of salt to 1 gallon of water. Boil the water, dissolve the salt completely, cool it below 40 degrees before it ever touches the meat. Warm brine on cold meat grows the wrong things before the salt takes hold. The egg float test. Drop a clean raw egg into the brine. If a circle the size of a quarter rides above the surface, the brine is strong enough. If the egg sinks, add salt. If half the egg rides up, you have overdone it and the meat will cure hard and bitter. 1 pound, 1 gallon, 1 egg. 200 years, 1 number. I was 14 the first time Earl let me salt a ham on my own. I rubbed the outside, felt good about it, packed it into the barrel. 6 weeks later, we opened it. The whole thing had a stink at the hip bone. I had skipped the joint. Earl said nothing when I packed it, nothing when we opened it. He just looked at me and said, "Rub every inch, Hank, even the ugly ones." That is the only lesson I ever needed twice. This week, buy 5 pounds of coarse, non-iodized salt. That is the whole entry ticket to this skill. Piece 4, the barrel. This is the container skill, and the wrong container will poison a batch faster than bad salt ever could. Picture Earl kneeling beside a white oak barrel outside the cabin door, snow dusting the lid, hoop iron ringed around staves that have held brine for 30 years without a single crack. That barrel is not furniture, it is a machine. And like any machine, the material it is made from matters as much as the design. Use a food-safe, non-reactive vessel. Traditionally, white oak barrel or stoneware crock. In modern terms, food-grade 5-gallon plastic bucket, glass crock, or stainless steel. Never cure in plain iron, aluminum, or copper. Salt brine plus reactive metal produces off flavors at best and real toxicity at worst. Earl knew this without knowing the chemistry. He used wood or stone, full stop. Pack the barrel in layers. Meat, salt, meat, salt. Pack it tight. Air pockets are where mold blooms first. Pour brine over until every single piece is fully submerged. Lay a clean flat board on top. Set a scrubbed stone or brick on the board. Every piece of meat must stay below the brine line. Anything that rises above it will grow the wrong things within 48 hours. Cover the barrel loosely. Cloth, wooden lid, something dust-tight but not gas-tight. The cure needs to breathe. A sealed barrel, and this matters for piece 7, is a different animal entirely. We will get there. Temperature: 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, steady. A basement corner, a spring house, a cold shed. In modern terms, a spare refrigerator or a cool cellar. The barrel wants cold that does not swing. If your storage goes from 20 degrees to 60 overnight, you will wreck the cure before piece 5 ever starts. This week, walk your house. Find your steady, cool corner, the one that does not swing more than 5 degrees day to night. Every Montana homestead had one. Yours does too. You just have not named it yet. Second pattern break, 4 pieces in. Everything so far, the weather, the cut, the salt, the barrel, most homesteaders know some version of. What is coming in pieces 5, 6, and 7 is where the packing houses earned their fortune. This is the ground the survival manuals skip. And piece 7, the one Earl underlined twice in that notebook, is the reason 5 men did not walk out of the Beartooth in April of 1891. We build to it. Piece 5, time and smoke. This is the part that turns cured meat into keeping meat. And this is the piece where the recipe books start giving you numbers that will get you killed if you trust them without understanding why. Curing time under brine at 36 to 40 degrees. Salt pork trim, 2 to 3 weeks, then holds indefinitely under brine. Bacon sides, 7 to 14 days, depending on thickness. Whole hams, rough rule of 2 to 3 days per pound. A 12-pound ham runs 24 to 36 days under brine. A 15-pound ham runs 30 to 45. Turn the meat every few days. Rotate top to bottom, bottom to top. The brine settles. What sits at the bottom gets more salt than what floats near the top. Rotation keeps the cure even. Skim any surface scum. The brine should stay clear and clean and smell sharp and salty. Cloudy brine, ropey brine, sour-smelling brine, dump it. Start over. Do not try to save a bad batch. The cost of starting over is salt and time. The cost of not starting over is everything. After cure, rinse briefly, pat dry, hang uncovered in cool air 12 to 24 hours. This forms the pellicle, a tacky surface skin that takes smoke evenly. Without the pellicle, the smoke sits on the outside in patches and never penetrates. Cold smoke, below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Hardwood only. Hickory, oak, apple, maple. Never softwood. Never resinous pine. Days, not hours. A ham might sit in cold smoke 3 to 5 days on and off. Bacon 3 to 4 days. The smoke is for flavor and surface protection. It is not what preserves the meat. Salt did that already. Smoke finishes it. Earl's notebook has schedules running 6 weeks brine, then 8 days smoke for a full Montana winter ham. Federal guidance from the early 20th century ran the same rhythm. 100 years, and the numbers have not moved. Below 90, hardwood, days, not hours. Salt preserves, smoke finishes. In that order, always. Piece 6. This one is not in the survival manuals. It is not in the YouTube videos. It is not in the modern homesteading guides. And it is the piece the packing houses worked hardest to erase. Because once you know it, you do not need them for 9 months of the year. After the smoke, after the pellicle, after the cure. Most people think they are done. They are not. They are halfway. Picture Earl in the smokehouse lifting a finished ham off the hook. He does not put it in the refrigerator. There is no refrigerator. He wraps it. First a layer of clean muslin, breathable, dust-tight, keeps the flies off. Then a layer of craft paper over the muslin, tied with twine. Then he hangs it in the cool dark of the storage shed, hook through the hock, hanging free so air moves around every surface. That ham will keep 14 months. Earl wrote it in the notebook in the winter of 1961. 14 months from slaughter to the last slice. No electricity, no refrigeration, no compromise on safety. The wrapping breathes. The darkness slows oxidation. The cool air holds the temperature steady. 3 things working together the way they always worked before somebody sold you a plug-in substitute. Here is who killed this piece of knowledge. In 1953, Swift & Company, the largest meat packer in America at the time, began a joint marketing campaign with Westinghouse, promoting refrigerated ham storage as the only safe method. Swift needed you buying their refrigerated product year-round. Westinghouse needed you running their appliances. The USDA updated its home preservation guidance the following year to recommend refrigeration for all cured meats. Nobody banned the muslin wrap. They just made sure your grandmother felt unsafe using it. Penn State Extension published guidance as recently as 2018, confirming that properly cured and smoked whole hams can be stored unrefrigerated in cool, dry conditions for extended periods. That is a modern land-grant university in this century telling you Earl's method still works. Muslin, craft paper, cool, dark air, hang it free. That is the piece they did not want you to have. This week, find 1 piece of muslin and 1 roll of craft paper. Put them on the shelf next to your salt. That is the whole setup. Third pattern break, 6 pieces in. Everything you have heard so far, the weather, the cut, the salt, the barrel, the smoke, the wrap, that is exactly where the 9 men in the Beartooth stood in January of 1891. 6 pieces right, barrel tight, smoke clean, meat wrapped and hanging. And 5 of them still did not make it to April, because there is a 7th piece, and we are there, piece 7. The last piece, the one Earl underlined twice, the one the packing houses did not have to erase because nobody was teaching it clearly enough to bother. Go back to the 9 men in the Beartooth, January 1891. Their salt was right, their barrel was tight, their smoke was clean, their wrap was on. By every measure they knew, they had done the job. So what killed 5 of them? 2 things, working together in a barrel. The first you have heard of before, Trichinella spiralis, the parasite that lives in pork and wild game, bear, boar, mountain lion. Salt slows it, smoke slows it, cold holds it in place. None of them kill it. What kills it is heat, sustained heat all the way through the meat. Every piece of cured pork, every slice of smoked bacon, every chunk of salt pork pulled from the barrel, cooked through, all the way through. No pink center, no warm middle. Opaque throughout, juices running clear, firm to the bone. The Centers for Disease Control confirm it in plain language. Trichinella is killed by sustained internal heat, not by curing, not by smoking, not by salt. Modern guidance puts the number at 145 degrees Fahrenheit for whole cuts with a 3-minute rest. That is the first thing. Your great-grandfather knew it. The men in the Beartooth forgot it. The second thing is the one nobody teaches, the one that makes this a 7-piece skill instead of 6. Clostridium botulinum, the bacterium that produces botulism toxin. It does not need oxygen to grow. It thrives in exactly the environment a sealed barrel creates: anaerobic, protein-rich, room temperature or above. The men in the Beartooth sealed their barrel tight against the cold, airtight, and inside that sealed barrel, in the warmth of the cabin where they kept it through the coldest nights, Clostridium botulinum did what it always does in an airless space with meat in it. Botulism does not announce itself. The meat looks right, smells right, tastes right. And then, 12 to 36 hours later, paralysis. Not pain, paralysis. The muscles stop working one by one. The last ones to go are the ones that move air in and out of the lungs. The men in the Beartooth did not die in agony. They died quietly because they forgot to breathe. Salt slows spoilage. Smoke protects the surface. Cold holds everything in place. Heat kills the worm. Air kills the spore. Miss either one of the last two, and the barrel becomes the coffin. The fix is simple. The barrel breathes, always. Cloth cover, not a sealed lid. Cool storage, not cabin warm. And every piece cooked through before it is eaten. Every piece, every time. No exceptions for the outside looking right. Earl wrote it in 1958. 2 sentences underlined twice in pencil. A sealed barrel in a warm room is not a barrel. It is a grave. Let it breathe and keep it cold. That is piece 7. That is what the 4 men who walked out of the Beartooth knew that the 5 did not. So here is the whole skill, yours now, all 7 pieces. Cold weather, solid animal, full bleed, overnight chill, then the knife. Hams whole, bone in, bacon square, rind on, shoulders to cure or grind. Everything else into the barrel. Coarse, non-iodized salt, 1 pound to 1 gallon of water. Egg float test. Brine cold before it touches meat. Rub every square inch. Miss the joint, lose the ham. Pack the barrel tight. Layered, submerged, weighted, non-reactive vessel. Steady cool corner between 36 and 40 degrees. Time measured in days for bacon, weeks for hams. Rinse, dry, pellicle. Cold smoke below 90, hardwood, days, not hours. Wrap in muslin and craft paper. Hang free in cool, dark air. And then the 2 pieces the packing houses priced you out of caring about. Cook it through, all the way through, every time. And let the barrel breathe, always. A sealed barrel in a warm room is not a barrel. It is a grave. 7 pieces, every one of them checkable, every one of them yours. This was never really about a hog or a barrel, neighbor. It was about being a person who cannot be shut off. If the trucks stop, your family eats. If the power goes, your family eats. If the price of a pound of bacon climbs to $20, and it will, you shrug and walk to the barrel. That is not survivalism. That is not doom talk. That is the ordinary competence your great-grandmother had on a Tuesday in December that got quietly taken from you and that you just took back. You do not have to master the whole hog this weekend. Do one thing this Saturday. Buy a 5-pound piece of pork belly and 5 pounds of coarse, non-iodized salt, 20 grams of salt per kilo of meat. Rub every square inch. Wrap it, refrigerate it. Turn it every day for a week. Rinse, dry, cook it through. Eat it Sunday. That is the whole entry ticket. That is your first piece of the barrel. Earl knew all 7 of these steps. He learned them from his father, who learned them from his. Somewhere between that man and you, somebody decided there was more money in you not knowing. That is all it ever was. Not a conspiracy, just a market that paid better when you forgot. Tell me down below, did your grandparents keep a barrel? Did they cure their own meat? Did they use the egg float test or something different? Different regions did this differently. The story that gets the most comments is the one I go deep on next. Your great-great-grandfather fed a family through a Montana winter with this skill. Now you can too. Do not let it die on your watch. Next time, the 2-cent trick your great-grandmother kept in a tin above the wood stove that put an entire food preservation industry out of business. And the year they made sure she forgot it was ever there. 1931. That is the year to circle. Keep the old ways. They kept.